Hello, and welcome to the Virtual Kansas City SQL Server User Group. Thanks, everyone, for joining. This month, we are coming off of FabCon and following it up with Xavier Villegas, presenting Intro to Microsoft Fabric Data Analytics for the Era of AI. Thank you for presenting for us today. For the audience, the session is recorded and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. If you have any questions, go ahead and pop them into the chat. And with that, I'm going to let you take it away.
All right. Thank you, Christina. It's a pleasure for me to be here today presenting in this user group. I'm not sure if I already presented or not, but yeah, it's always a pleasure to talk about the data platform, in this case, Microsoft Fabric. So the idea today is basically give you all a brief introduction to what Microsoft Fabric is, right? Definitely, we heard about Fabric everywhere all the time. It's Microsoft data platform. I would say most concurring phrase, right? Microsoft Fabric. So it looks like we kind of forgot about Azure, but instead we have Fabric. So the idea is, again, provide you with this brief introduction, see how AI, which is also an interesting topic nowadays, fits into the solution, right? So let's start. A little bit about myself. My name is Javier Villegas. I'm based in Buenos Aires, Argentina. I work at a Mediterranean shipping company since 19 years ago. I've been involved with data platform, with SQL Server, Azure SQL, and most recently with Fabric as well, since around 30 years. I'm Microsoft MVP in the Data Platform Award category, and I'm also Microsoft certified trainer. I like to call myself technical speaker, right? I try to participate as much as possible on every single community event, virtual, in person, everything that I can attend. I'm also one of the local organizers and coordinators of our local user group here, SQL Argentina, in where we have our community, our YouTube channel, our monthly show, and soon to have important in-person event here in Buenos Aires. If you speak Spanish, you are more than welcome to join us. I also have my contact information in the left side of the screen, my email address, Twitter, LinkedIn, and my personal blog, right? So let's start with the presentation, right? There are some phrases within the slide that I'd like to read it, so then all together we can analyze it properly to see what it means, right? So here we have the first interesting word, unified, right? So Microsoft Fabric, a unified analytic solution for the era of AI. The unified thing is a key word that we will go through the presentation and try to dig a little bit further. If you are not aware of, Microsoft Fabric was announced a bit more than a year ago, actually end of 2023, during the Microsoft Ignite event. It was announced as general availability, right? Few months earlier, during the Microsoft Build, the same year, 2023, it was announced as public preview, so everybody was able to test it and play around a little bit more. But back in November 2023, announced as general availability, right? So as a full set of product/services available for everybody with SLA support, etc., etc., etc. In that event, Microsoft Ignite, it was also Arun, the CVP for Azure Data, right? Which in one of his slides, he presented this phrase, which I love it, and I couldn't agree more. Data is the fuel that powers AI, right? So without data, there is no models, there are no AI, there are no Copilot, not ChatGPT, right? So definitely data is the fuel for all the goodness that we have with AI nowadays. So as for us, which are data platform professionals, we are the ones who have to deal with that and handle it and manage it properly. So with this solution, we will try to, prepare what we can do with data in order to prepare it for AI. So here we have an interesting phrase also to start analyzing deeply, right? Microsoft Fabric is an end-to-end, right? Remember, end-to-end analytical platform, right? Analytical platform is also something that we're gonna dig a little bit further, that provide a single integrated environment for data professionals and business to collaborate on data projects. End-to-end means that if we are doing an analytical project, right, we have everything we need, right? Nothing else is needed. End-to-end, from the data ingestion to the storage and processing, and to present the output to another project or with a report or a dashboard through Power BI, for example. So that is what ends-to-ends means, right? Analytical solution is something quite interesting, and this part is something that I like a lot, because when Microsoft Fabric was announced back in the day, it was an analytical platform. So for doing business intelligence, analytics, right? And a specific type of workload. But recently, Microsoft has announced an additional component within Fabric that we're gonna discover it in few minutes, right? Which is changing this paradigm of analytic platform, and maybe is changing it a little bit, right? Provide a single integrated environment. Single is that we're gonna be connecting to the Fabric portal, and from there, we're gonna be able to consume this end-to-end tooling solution without having to do furthermore, right? So from a single entry point, we have everything we need, right? And something that is not mentioned here, but it's important to highlight it, is that Microsoft Fabric is a SaaS solution, software as a service, right? Meaning that we don't have to install any virtual machine, any software download, ISO files, install, configure, etc., etc., etc. No, it's software as a service. So we go to the Fabric portal, and from there we have everything in just a few seconds, right? I remember back in the days when I started working with SQL Server and data warehouses and all the solutions on premise, that was way more complex than what it is today. Because first of all, you have to size the hardware, prepare and install, buy the servers, of course, prepare the networking, the authentication to have the servers all align, install the software, and then see how to consume the data, store and process it, right? So if you wanted to do, let's say, a proof of concept or something specifically, right, just to make sure that what you have in mind, what was your architecture, can be handled by that hardware and software, you have to, first of all, spend a lot of money, and then, since you decide to start until you were able to start it, it's going to take some time, right? Till the servers arrive, you do the installation, and so on and so forth, right? Nowadays, with Microsoft Fabric, you need to do a proof of concept, and in a matter of no more than 5 minutes, you're able to do anything that you need, right? And with the capability of scaling, right? So for example, back in that example that I just provide, let's say that you have this analytical solution that for a specific reason you are running out of computer power because business is doing too good. You're getting a lot of data, you're processing, and you're getting more projects to handle and deal with, right? So maybe you have to start putting faster CPU, more memory, larger disk, etc., etc. Within Fabric, which is a SaaS solution, again, in the cloud, you are able to scale up and down in a matter of seconds, right? Of course, it's going to have some cost associated to it, but again, all the timings that we used to have before, right? Now it's a matter of seconds. So we pass from months to minutes in order to have our analytical project up and running, right? So which are the components that we can utilize within this Microsoft Fabric solution, right? And here you will see some components that maybe you remember from before the Fabric era, right? Data Factory, right, to do everything related to data integration, Synapse data engineering, data warehousing, data science, Synapse real-time analytics, and Power BI. This is quite interesting because, before Fabric, Microsoft also provide us with a solution to do data analytics, right? We used to go to the Azure portal, spin up Data Factory and Azure Synapse Analytics, a dedicated pool and serverless pool, right? And then Power BI, then, wide everything. And, we have this kind of solution, right? But it's not the same as what it is now. Why? Because in Microsoft Fabric, right, Microsoft took all those three components, Data Factory, Synapse, and Power BI, definitely enhanced them a lot and put them within this same umbrella called Microsoft Fabric. In the past, with the previous solution, right, we had to buy pipelines with Data Factory, the Synapse components, and Power BI. So in order for us to do the setup, first of all, within the Azure infrastructure, we had to do the whole wiring, the connectivity, the authentication between all those three components, right? For the billing purpose, right, we also have three different bills, one for Power BI, one for Synapse, and one for Data Factory. And depending on how long you take, how many times you execute the pipelines, or maybe the size of your dedicated or serverless pool, that's going to have one cost. So at the end of the month, it was quite complex to know how much you were spending, right? Now, since everything is within the same umbrella of Microsoft Fabric, all that wiring thing has disappeared. Same for the billing, right? Now we will see that in Fabric we have this concept of capacity, right? In where we're going to pay a fixed price per month, and doesn't matter, how many times we execute the pipelines, the amount of data that we ingest, and those kind of things. We're going to have this fixed price, right? So again, Data Factory, Synapse, and Power BI, part of this analytical umbrella named Microsoft Fabric, right? I like to do this comparison because actually it's quite good. Microsoft has this other solution for productivity, right? In where we call it Microsoft 365, aka Microsoft Office, right? So in where we have Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, so multiple components within the same productivity solution named Microsoft Office, right? Fabric is kind of the same for data analytics, right? Multiple components within the same umbrella. Within Microsoft Office, there is this storage layer called OneDrive. in where on each of the components, right, Word, Excel, etc., you are able to save the data, store the data, work with the data, and share the data, right? Within Microsoft Fabric, there is also a common storage area named OneLake, in where everything that you do within Microsoft Fabric gets stored in OneLake, right? And the concept is kind of the same. You're able to store, process, and share the data, right? What is interesting about this OneLake storage layer is that for the very first time, Microsoft has implemented an open source format, so Delta Parquet, right? In the past, with the former, let's say, Synapse Analytics, Microsoft used to have, and still have, because it's still available, uh, a proprietary storage format, right? So nobody was able to understand or read or do anything with the file, the file storage, right? Now, since it is Delta Parquet, is a widely used standard, it's way easier for us to use it. And also at the same time, it's quite better to do integration with other analytical solutions that we will see in a minute, right? So OneLake, we will see that we can ingest data and the destination will go and be stored in the OneLake. We can do processing in a data warehouse, in a lakehouse, etc., and everything will be stored within OneLake, right? So if we go one step ahead, and here is where you're going to see something different from the previous uh, uh, slide, is that we have data factory, we have this component real-time analytics that we're going to dig into a little bit more, the analytical part and Power BI. But if you see a little bit more in this slide, there is also this component called databases, right? So last year in Microsoft Ignite 2024, Microsoft announced SQL databases for Fabric, right, as a public preview. So everybody can use it. It's still not available as GA, so it cannot be used in production, let's say. But within Fabric, now you are able to create a relational SQL database. That means that this data, you will have your relational operational database and will be also synchronized with OneLake. So the data can be used in any of the other analytical components. So eventually you can have your operational application like stock control or something like that, and your application connected to this database, and when you insert, update, or delete data, those rows are stored in OneLake, so you may have another component doing analytics with that real-time data. So initially, when I mentioned end-to-end unified analytical solution, right? Now Microsoft is trying to remove the word analytic, right? Just to be the data platform in where you can do analytics, but also relational slash operational processes with SQL databases. So that is super, super cool. You also see here in this slide the layer which is called Copilot in Fabric, right? We know that Microsoft is pushing AI with Copilot in multiple areas. Bing, Microsoft 365, within Teams, within Outlook, that help us to write email, help us to do presentation, help us in our team meetings, etc., etc., etc. How Copilot help us within Fabric? We're going to go through a demo later on, more than a demo, a short video that will explain all the goodness. But, you know, like, for example, Copilot in GitHub that helps the developer to write code. This is kind of the same. If we are working with a data warehouse, it will help us to write T-SQL code, store procedure to work with our warehouse. If we're doing data engineering or data science project that requires Spark, Python, and use the Lakehouse, right? It will help us to write the code as well. If we're working on designing a Power BI visual, right? It will also help us and assist us always with natural language, right? To interact with Copilot and get what we need. Of course, as I mentioned, one lake, right? The storage component across the whole solution, and Microsoft Pureview, which is the component that helps us to govern and assess all the data that we have within the solution. So another thing which was mentioned in the presentation and also in the events that came later is this concept of mirroring, right? So what is mirroring in Microsoft Fabric? So as we all know, when we do an analytical solution, we have this technique which are called ETL, right? Extraction, transformation, and load. So we connect to the operational data source, which could be a SQL Server, an Oracle database, could be SAP, any operational database, right? We extract the data, we eventually do some transformation, and then we load the data into our analytical solution, right? Those ETLs processes happens on a scheduled basis, right? So once an hour, once every six hours, once a day, depending on what we're trying to accomplish with our analytical solution, right? So it's not grabbing, let's say, real-time data, because again, if we run it every 6 hours, we're going to get the snapshot, and then we have to wait 6 hours. The operational part will keep getting more data, right? But we won't see that data reflected into the analytical solution until we run the ETL process again, right? So with mirroring, what Microsoft is trying to accomplish is that we're going to have the possibility to connect to operational databases, operational components. And as you can see here in the slide, there are Microsoft components, but also from different vendors, and also relational and non-relational databases, right? So Azure Cosmos DB, Azure SQL Database, Snowflake, and MongoDB. And what we're going to be able to do when we connect to those data sources? Well, with this concept of mirroring, right, we're going to be able to seamlessly transfer the data in near real time from the operational component into Fabric. So if instead of having Fabric SQL database, as we mentioned before, we have Azure SQL DB, right, or Cosmos DB, or Snowflake, or Mongo, and many more to come, right? We're going to be able to select a specific database, a set of tables, etc. And without affecting the operational part, we will be able to synchronize the data seamless in near real time, right? So the goal is eventually, for certain scenarios, is not having to use ETL processes, right? Because the data will be flowing continuously in near real time into the analytical solution, right? So this is really, really good. So if we go a step further into what Fabric is, right? We have the different components at the top: data factory for the ingestion, data engineering, data science, data warehousing, real-time analytics, and Power BI, right? Using a serverless compute layer in where, depending on what we use, it's going to switch to from one to another: Spark, T-SQL, CustoQL, KQL, or analysis services, right? And then the layer for the storage. Then we have mirroring, right, to seamlessly get the data into one lake. And as you can see at the bottom of the slide, there is this component called multi-cloud shortcuts, right? Remember that I mentioned that one lake is based on an open standard Delta Parquet, right? As many other solutions in the market, right? So what can we do with this multi-cloud shortcut? Well, let's say that part of our company has a project sitting in Amazon or Google or eventually Microsoft with Dataverse, right? So we're going to be able to create this shortcut, connect to those components in an Amazon S3 bucket, for example, right? And seamlessly, without copying the data, reference that data within Fabric. So we won't need to go to Amazon and copy and ingest everything into Fabric. No, we're going to create this shortcut, reference the data, and use it. And for example, if we have a notebook in where we are using Spark, we can reference and join tables which are sitting locally in the lakehouse with tables that are sitting outside the Fabric solution in an Amazon S3 bucket, right? So this is the good part of having an open source integrated file storage, right? Because we can reference any kind of data outside, and the goal is avoid data duplication as much as possible, right? So for example, if you have your own project, right? You are working with this concept of workspace, and for the ones that are coming from Power BI, well, definitely they know what workspace is, but basically it's a logical grouping of components within Power BI or Fabric, right? And you have all your components here that in this case can involve, for example, a lakehouse or a data set. And let's say that another part of your company is dealing with another project which required your data set, right, to have access to your data set so they can use it for, train a model or anything, right? In the past, the solution was basically to copy the data set from here to there. Now, they're going to just reference the data through a shortcut so we can share the data set through multiple workspaces without data duplication, right? That's the goal, avoid the data duplication. So, as I mentioned before, we have this concept of workspaces in where we have and we put everything underneath, right? And what we need to do here, or the main goal here, is to avoid the data silos, right? So we can easily share the data set between different areas of the company within the same Fabric tenant, for example, right? And completely avoid the EDS with mirroring and the data duplication with shortcuts. And as the third option, as we said earlier, if we need to reference data that is sitting in an external cloud solution, right, we can also do it. So how do we start with Microsoft Fabric? Well, it's quite simple. First of all, right, Microsoft is giving to everybody, right, the possibility of creating a 60-day trial, right, for Microsoft Fabric. So you just need a Microsoft 365 account, right? And then you can spin up your 60-day trial and you can do anything, right? So if you need to do your proof of concept, right, mainly you don't have to spend any money, right? You go spin up this trial, and for 60 days you have almost full functional solution in where you can validate your project, and eventually, if you consider that is the right solution, you just buy the capacity and move on. But everybody has for free, right, 60 days to try out Microsoft Fabric. So if we go a little bit deeper on each of the components, we mentioned data ingestion, we mentioned real-time, data engineering, and data science, right? This is why at the beginning we call single solution for every business need, right? Because within the same company, you may have to spin up a traditional data warehouse, and your developer has knowledge on T-SQL, so they can work with T-SQL writing, store procedure, etc. But within the same company, you may have another area which is doing data science using Python, Spark, R, Scala, right? And you have everything that you need in there, right? Eventually, let's say that you are working with real-time, you need to do real-time analytics. So you have sensors around the field which are capturing data in real time. You can get that data into Fabric and do analytics at the top of it, right? And of course, Power BI, as we knew it from before, but with some steroids, right, that we're gonna describe in a minute. I was mentioning data warehouse, lakehouses, one lake, Delta Parquet. It's a little bit of a confusion, right? So I always like to present this specific slide to clarify these 2 points. So within one lake, you can create either a lake house or a warehouse or both of them if you need it, right? But why you will create one or the other? Well, it's basically depending on what you need to do, depending on your skills, etc., etc., etc. So I like to describe both of them. So, for example, a warehouse is basically storing structured data, tables with columns and relationships, right? Who is using mainly a data warehouse? Well, a data warehouse developer or a SQL engineering. And the skill set that you need is mainly SQL, right, to write T-SQL. On the other hand, right, a lakehouse can support structured data, tables with columns and relationships, but also semi-structured data, for example, JSON files, or completely unstructured data, which, for example, PDF files, right? Who will be using a lakehouse? Mainly a data engineering or a data scientist, right? And the skill sets are basically related with Spark, Scala, Python, R, and also SQL, right? So that is why I want to highlight this before we move on and we present this with the demo, right? So in Power BI, as we know it, right, now embedded or part of Fabric, right, is the part that we use at the end basically to present in a nice report, in a nice dashboard, to the end user, right? And, before Fabric, in order to access the data from Power BI, we have, let's say, 2 modes, right? The one that is called direct query mode and the one that is called import mode, right? Each of them has pros and cons, right? Direct query mode basically gives us the possibility that from Power BI, we go directly to the source to do the query and retrieve the output to present into the dashboard, right? The pro is that you get to the data in real time. The cons is that it takes some time, so the performance is not the best if you go through all those layers to go to the source, right? Instead, import mode takes internally some snapshot of the data. So from Power BI, you access those snapshots, so the data is coming quite fast, right? That is the pro. The cons is that those snapshots happens from time to time. So you are not always accessing the data up to date, right? So now in Power BI, within Fabric, you have a third method, which is called direct lake mode, which combines the goodness of direct query mode for the for access to the data in real time with the performance benefit within import mode, right? So this is direct lake. There is an additional component within Fabric which is completely new. Was not before in Azure Data. It was not Synapse, no data factory, so nothing. So, which is called Data Activator. What is Data Activator? Well, first of all, it's a low-code, no-code experience that will help us to create some sort of rules, right, from the real-time data that is injected into Fabric, and then based on those rules, we'll fire a trigger that will execute an action, right? Let me give you an example so you can understand it better. Let's say that you have, again, a field with multiple sensors that are capturing and transferring into Fabric in real-time events related to temperature, right? So you have thousands of those sensors, and every 1 minute, let's say, you're getting the temperature of each of the sensors, right? So what you can do with a low-code, no-code experience is create a rule that will evaluate, for example, if the temperature of any of the sensors goes above a certain number of degrees or below certain number of degrees with X consecutive samples, let's say for 5 minutes, it will fire an action, right? So this way, you don't need a person to be sitting in front of the dashboard just getting the input of the 1,000 sensors and evaluate constantly if something wrong is happening, right? You define this rule, you program this rule, right? And if the situation matches to what you define in the rule, automatically it will take an action, right? So let's say that one of the sensor is getting temperatures above the threshold that we define within the rule, right? It will take an action. And the action could be sending a team message, an Outlook email, running a Power Automate artifact, or any custom action like, for example, running PowerShell, right? So this is super cool because, again, easily we can have this evaluating and sensing the data coming in real time and taking these actions for us, right? So that is that activator part of Microsoft Fabric. So we also have Copilot within Microsoft Fabric, right? As we said, Copilot will give us the possibility of applying AI into the Fabric component. So what can we do within Fabric using Copilot? Well, it's going to help us to generate, for example, Power BI reports and enhance the existing one, generate that code, DAX code, if we are working with semantic model. When we try to discover and create the Azure Data Factory pipelines, it's going to help us, also help us to generate SQL code, Python code, or if we are working with Data Activator, will help us on developing the triggers. All this using human language, natural language. So we're going to have the sidecar, right? And we're going to be chatting with Copilot and say, hey, I need the code to enhance my existing Power BI, this visual. So we're going to be chatting with the data and get what we need, right? So that's the part. All these are, sorry, the part that will help us to do the authoring of the data analytical solution, right? But within Power BI, Copilot will help us to do something more than creating reports. So let's see this video and let's discuss it right after.
Introducing the next generation of AI in Microsoft Power BI. Copilot in Power BI empowers your people to unlock the full potential of your data and move from data to insights faster. Now, with Copilot in Power BI, you can use natural language to bring your data to life. Simply describe the visuals and insights you're looking for, and next generation AI will create your report and help you refine it. You can then dig into this data further by asking a question, and Copilot will find the best answer. Not only does Copilot help you visualize your data, but it taps into Power BI's advanced analysis capabilities to help you find key influencers and outliers and create forecasts. Copilot can summarize your data into easy-to-understand text narratives that help others quickly get important and relevant insights. And for analysts who are creating calculations and modeling data, you can simply describe what you want, and the code is automatically generated. With Copilot in Power BI, turning data into impact has never been easier.
Turning data into impact, right? So it's like we don't need a predefined visual for any specific thing that we have in our solution. We're going to be chatting with Power BI and asking which were the top 10 products that were sold in the last quarter and compare that with the previous quarter or the previous fiscal year. And instead of going to the Power BI developer to have a visual create on that specific scenario, Power BI will do the analysis and will present all the necessary visuals without any code development, right, for us, right? So we're going to be interacting with the data. We're going to get this impact, this insight from the data that we have without having to have predefined visual, right? So to me, this is awesome. This is really, really cool, right? So having the possibility to chat with our data. I see here one comment in the chat window saying that it is the replacement for Azure Databricks. I would say that yes and no, right? There are some areas that are overlapping. Is of course another solution. You know that Azure Databricks is, in fact, is Databricks running in within the Azure infrastructure, but Databricks also runs in other cloud provider, etc. So there are components or part of the solution that are quite similar, but others that are not, right? So in some areas are competing, in some others are complementing one to each other. Can you elaborate on when to use either Databricks and Fabric? Well, my personal experience is that for Databricks, it's a more mature solution, right? But it doesn't have any of the easy to use or easy to access with the Copilot part. So there's no Copilot in Databricks. So if you are trying to get into a solution to develop, to do your data analytics for your company, right? And let's say you are not an experienced data engineering, and you may have some knowledge of Spark, Python, and you may need maybe Copilot to help you to write the code. Well, maybe Fabric is the way to start. Databricks is, as I said, a more mature solution, which has a data warehouse, which has also lakehouse, and you can do kind of similar things like ingesting data, processing, etc., etc., etc. Right? So that is one of the solutions. The other is that Fabric, since is a newborn, there are still components that are in preview, are not fully available. So if eventually you need to use some of those components, well, Databricks most probably is have it more mature, right? But to start a brand new solution, definitely my choice is Fabric. So why don't we see this in action, right? We talk a lot. Let's see the basic of what we can do with Microsoft Fabric. So let me jump to my virtual machine. Here I am connected to my Fabric portal, right? As you can see here at the top, I'm using the trial, right? So I still have 20 days left, but I can do anything I need, right? If we want to do this demo, if we want to do a proof of concept or anything, right, we can do it with the trial. Here in the low left corner, we have this part which we said Fabric, but we can also switch to Power BI, and then we go to, let's say, the former Power BI portal. But if we want to do furthermore, so do a solution, right, from scratch, a data analytics solution, we start from the Fabric portal. So in order to start, we need to create a workspace, right? The workspace is, for example, my proof of concept. I will create all the components in there, right? I will do the ingestion, create the lakehouse, the warehouse, everything I need. And then eventually, if, you know, what I'm doing is something that I want to do more, and let's say the proof of concept was successfully, right? I go by a Fabric capacity and I just move this workspace from the trial capacity to the paid capacity, right? Additionally, for billing, right, we can go get the billing for per workspace, right? And eventually, if we are done with this specific project, or let's say the POC is done, we just can go delete the workspace, and that will wipe out all the components inside the workspace. So in order for us to start, let's create a brand new workspace, right? It's quite easy. We just go here, we specify the name, right? Kansas City workspace. Here we can put an image to identify the workspace easier. And then when we go here to advanced, we specify which user can take it, can use it actually, and we select the license mode, right? In this case, as I said, we are using the trial, so just hit apply, and in a matter of few seconds, I have my workspace created. Of course, empty. There is nothing in there. So what do we need to do first? Well, I will create the storage part. To do the storage part, I will create a warehouse and a data warehouse. Sorry, a warehouse and a lakehouse. So I go here to new item, right? In new item, you will see that there are a bunch of components that we can create. Prepare data, get data, store data, right? So there are too many, and there are more coming every week, let's say. So before it was easy to go dig into them. Now it's better just to go and search at the top of it. So I will put warehouse here, and I will create a warehouse. What do we need to specify for the warehouse? Just the name, right? KCS data warehouse 01. So we just create the name, and in a matter of seconds, right, we have the warehouse created, of course, empty, right? And as you can see, the environment has adjusted to the warehouse environment. So remember, in a warehouse, we use mainly SQL, right? So we have new SQL query, get data. We have here the exploring where we see the schemas, the tables, etc., etc. Remember, this is completely empty, right? We just created. So now we go back to the root of our workspace, and now we see the component warehouse created. I will go again here to new item, and I will create a layout, right? So I go to layout, and then same as before, I have to specify the name only. So layout 01. So when I create it, in a matter of seconds, again, the layout is created and the environment has adjusted to this environment. Remember, structure, semi-structure, or structure data, right? So we have the possibility of having tables, right? But also files, right? And of course, it's empty. And here, the environment has adjusted to notebook, right? So I can create a new notebook and start using Spark with the data, right? So if I go back to the root, I have both the warehouse and the lakehouse created, but both of them are empty. So what's next? We have to start ingesting data into my solution, right? So what we can do here, so I will go to new again, and I will type pipeline. In pipeline, we're going to create these ETL shops to connect to a data source and ingest data into my lakehouse, for example. So I just create the pipeline, and as you can see, the environment is adjusting to the data factory pipeline option, right? So I go here and hit the wizard copy data system, in where we basically has to choose a source, do eventually a transformation, and then choose the destination. As you can see here in the sources, there are multiple cloud sources. Microsoft, no Microsoft, relational, not relational. Again, we have SQL Server, of course, but also Oracle, Postgres, MySQL, Snowflake, DB2, SAP HANA, Azure SQL Database, Dataverse, Salesforce. So we have a big number, MariaDB, Azure Cosmos DB, V2, Amazon S3, Microsoft 365, you name it. There are multiple data sources that we can connect, and again, without downloading any driver or any piece of software, right? I can also go here to sample data, and in sample data, we have some public data sources that we can use, right? So I will go to, for example, public holidays. This one has no security. It's public available, just intended for demos. And I'm just connected, right? What Fabric is doing right now is selecting the source, is giving me the preview of the data, right? So it's giving me the first 10 rows and the data model. So then I hit next, right? And I have to choose the destination. From here, I can create a new lakehouse or warehouse, but what I will be doing here is selecting the lakehouse that I already create, right, in the previous step. So this table, public holiday, right, I can save it locally into one lake on a table, right, or into a file. So in this case, I will choose table, and I will choose a new table, right, because I can load it into an existing table. We can put the name here. I will put public holidays, right? Here we have the data model at the source and the destination. So eventually we can combine columns, change the column names, change the data type, etc., etc., etc. So we can do any sort of transformation in here. And finally, we have the destination and the summary. So we hit save and run. And what we have here is the pipeline, quite similar to what we used to have with Data Factory, right? And here the pipeline is already saved. Now is queue, right? And in few seconds, we'll switch to in progress. So now is in progress and moving. What it's doing here is basically getting the data from the source and sending it into my lakehouse, right? This will, here you have the duration, 26 seconds, succeed, so done. I go back to the lakehouse, and now when I go to the lakehouse, I go to tables. Let me refresh this. So I go to tables, and now I should have my public holiday, which initially I saw it as a file or on an external data source, but now I have it locally as a table in my lakehouse. All right. Remember I mentioned that we can upload files. So I can go here to files, hit the dots here and do upload files. All right. Then I go to my local computer. I go to the files that I have stored on my computer, right? And then I hit, for example, studentscore.csv. What I'm doing there is basically uploading the file. This is a CSV file, nothing more than that, right? So now the file is uploaded. So the file that I have in my local drive now is in Fabric, here, the student score. So when I hit at the top of the file, I see the content of the CSV file, right? So what can I do next? I can go at the top of the file, hit these three dots, and say load to table, to a new table, right? Here I specify the table name. The first column has the first row contain the column names, and the separator is comma. Then I hit load, and basically the CSV file that I have in my local drive, in a matter of few seconds, it will be a table within my lakehouse, right? This is super, super cool. And now we have it to do analytics with that, right? Another way to import data into Fabric is, remember that I mentioned OneDrive? Well, then we also mentioned OneLake. If I go to my computer here, we have this component called OneLake, right? Let me go to Explorer. Here I have OneLake, right? Here, OneLake. This is a component that you install in your local machine, and it's basically mapping OneLake into your local computer. So what you have here is all the workspaces that you create in your Fabric solution represented here as folders. As you can see here, we don't see the one for the one that we just create, the Kansas City. So I just go here, hit right click. And this is not working, so let me just see what happened. OneLake. Okay, here. I should have. Okay, here. Synchronize from OneLake. So I just hit synchronize, and what we will see here is that the workspace that we create now, we have it as a folder. So if we dive into it, we have the warehouse and the lakehouse. Let's go to the lakehouse. We have tables. If we go to the tables, the two tables that we just create, here is the Parquet file, etc., right? Public holiday, the same. So if I go to files, we will see the file student score that we upload in the previous example, right? But I can go here to Explorer. I can go to my C drive, temp files. And if I had a set of files that I want to put in there, I just grab the Parquet, the CSV, and the JSON file. We just move them there, right? Like a regular drag and drop. I go back to Fabric and hit refresh. And now what we drag and drop in my storage, we see it locally in one lake. And we can convert any of these files into tables if we want, right? And remember what I mentioned earlier about the being able to connect to, for example, Amazon S3. So if I go to files, I hit the three dots, I hit here, new shortcut. So I go to new shortcut, and here we have all the possibilities, right? I will go to Amazon S3. I have the connection already created. I have an Amazon S3 bucket created, right? So I just connect. I have a folder with my name, and in that folder, in Amazon S3, there are 3 CSV files, right? So I just go and map the folder, right? So I just create the shortcut, and without any data duplication, right? I see the folder stored in my S3 here, and I see the files, and I can just do the 3 dot here, load to tables, new table. And same as when the file was local, now the file is sitting on a third-party cloud storage, and I'm getting into Fabric, and I'm converting these CSV files into table, right? So this is actually what we can do with Fabric. As you can see, super simple. You can do it in a matter of seconds without spending any money, right? So let's go back to the slide. Let me, all right. So Microsoft put and make available a ton of resources for the community, the data professional, to get involved with Fabric, right? So videos, training, ebooks, training series, digital events, everything that you need. The starting point is aka.ms/fabric. Over there, you can sign in for the trial, but also can dig into the learning material, right? So there are a lot of them. One of the learning possibility is through Microsoft Learn, right? There was initially a series called Microsoft Learn Fabric, right? That were several episodes in multiple time zones and multiple languages, right? That there were several episodes tackling everything from Fabric from the beginning, like the getting started, into all the components, right? This series is already passed, right? As you can see, it was in January 2024, but it's all available in YouTube, right? The series is in Spanish, it's in English, and after this one, there were 2 more, one targeted to SQL databases in Fabric, and the other one targeted to data engineering, right? With multiple episodes, multiple time zones, multiple languages. I had the pleasure to be part of some of those, right? So definitely all this is available there for you to use it. Finally, if you want to get started right now, as for today, Microsoft is coming up with this AI Skill Fest Challenge, become a certified fabric data engineering, and it's giving you all the necessary training, including exercises and a sandbox environment for you to get trained into the DP 700 certification, right? And as I said, starting point, aka .ms upgrade to Fabric or Fabric, you're gonna land into the same place. And with that, we just finish the presentation. We have some room for questions.
So Malcolm had a question in the chat. You can either read it or it's a mouthful, or I can read it.
Okay, so the one for Databricks, we already covered. Hopefully
Right.
is answered. So then there is this other point, giving the example in the video on how human ask unstructured language to lead complex data analysis and presentation of visual. Does this mean that the real battle is making sure we have data of sufficient quality for the purpose at hand? That it's all the data collection problems, measured problems must still be dealt with outside of Fabric. Okay, there is a phrase that is quite famous these days on related to AI and to data with start with the letter S in, S out, right? So if you don't have your data well prepared enough to get into Fabric for any AI, what you're gonna get as a result is the same thing, right? It's not gonna be good. So it's not that you just forget about doing any development and you just talk to the data and that's it. No, behind the scene, you need to work and prepare a semantic model which is able to interact and answer the question that you will be asking with Copilot, right? What we saw in the video is awesome, but behind the scenes, there is a lot of preparation, right? You're gonna be talking to the semantic model. Then you have to be able to create what is called synonyms, right? Because maybe you have a column which has a specific name that can be a question and could be representing multiple things. So you have to create all those synonyms, right? So depending on who is asking, it may ask of a container, a box, a pile, or whatever, but at the end it's the same thing, right? So it's not like we are done here. We just need to chat and we're gonna get every single answer, right? There is a lot of development behind the scene that need to be accomplished. Luckily, Copilot is also helping us with the code that we need to implement behind the scenes to be able to do and see what we got in the video. Hopefully the question is answered.
Yeah, I would say I would add to it that it said outside of Fabric. So no, you can still deal with your data quality checks inside of Fabric, but none of that's changing. It's still the same old, you have to do data quality checks.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But as you can see, this is extremely powerful, right? And again, in a matter of few seconds, I was able to create a lakehouse, a data warehouse, ingest data from files. I can even connect to my Azure SQL database. If I want, I connect to Amazon S3, and in no time, I can do analytics right away. So definitely, to me, this is fabulous.
I think Abasar has a question. If you want to come off your mic or put them in the chat, either one is fine.
Yeah, hi. Let me know if you can hear me.
We can, yeah.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Christina, and thanks, Xavier, for that wonderful presentation. I just have a quick question for the enterprise. One of the most important thing um, is regarding the data governance. Yeah, so two parts to it. One, every organization wants to know what somebody should see, and the other thing, they want to know from the audit perspective what somebody did see. So that's the part which I am actually struggling to figure out from the Fabric perspective, how that happens in Fabric.
Okay. There are two things for you. First of all, briefly mentioned in the presentation, Microsoft Pureview, which is the platform related to data governance, auditing, etc., which is outside Fabric but involves Fabric, right? But if you want to go deeper, it was just announced the week before in the FabCon, this concept of one security, right? Which will help you to do more granular access to any of the Fabric components and also auditing, right? So that was just announced. Most probably we will start seeing some of these things arising soon as previews, public preview, and finally GA, right? But the whole security part within Fabric is one security just announced, and a more mature solution outside Fabric, which is part of the family, is Microsoft Pureview that will help you to do governance, right? Not only to identify columns, names, data types, and those kind of things. You can create your catalog, for example, based on business rule, business object through the data catalog feature within Pureview. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I haven't explored it personally, but I know, yeah, to the point of his questions, I've had some of the same questions. So I think event houses may have some of that auditing capabilities. Again, have not done any of that with log analytics myself within a workspace, enabling that capability. But then you may also, while you're waiting for Purview or other options, look at some of the APIs if you're good at programming with APIs to pull some of that security information. Because I know for my group, I have a lot of workspaces and I want to know who has access to what. And I don't see anything yet that's native to the system. So looking at like, okay, well, how would we design this with a Power BI report that uses an API to get that information? Because it is in that. We just haven't done it yet.
Just
And
one more.
maybe going to the previous question, which was related to Databricks. Well, the security part is well more mature in Databricks and in Azure Databricks than in
absolutely.
Fabric. That for sure.
Sure. So just one more quick question. I don't know whether there is a definitive answer for that or not, but if I see from Fabric perspective, what all contributes to the pricing of the platform? I know the maybe storage, compute, but I don't know what extent. And is there anything else which also contributes to the pricing of the platform?
Okay, right now in Fabric, you have this concept of capacity that will give you a set of, amount of storage and processing power, let's say, and it is measured in numbers. The relationship is still a little bit difficult to explain. So there is a big page explaining everything related to capacities, but just to make it short, it goes from F2 to F 2048. So you have F2, F4, F16, 64, etc., etc. And each of them has more processing power and a little bit more of storage, right? Each capacity has a fixed price per month, depending on the processing power that you need, right? You have the capability within Fabric to monitor the resource consumption within your whole tenant or your workspace or any of the components that you use, right? So eventually, if you need to scale up because you are running out of resources when you are process in a pipeline or something, or eventually, if you're not using it that much, this is the benefit of cloud computing. You can scale up and scale down, or scale down with no time, right away, right? And each of the F capacity, as I said, has a fixed price. There is also another licensing model, which is the pay-as-you-go, that eventually you can pause the compute layer, right? So you won't be paying for the compute, you will be only paying for storage, right? Because that is something that stays there forever. But eventually you can turn on and off the compute layer and save some money when you are not using it. Mm.
Yeah, and that
all.
could actually save you a lot of money. I know as we were dabbling our feet into it, we were like, well, we don't know what size we want, so we'll start off here. We don't want to reserve a capacity yet because we don't know what size we want. So we did, as for our, our dev work, we did choose that pay as you go. And, I'm working on it 8 hours a day, and then I have a Logic app that just automatically pauses it. So it's really not having that 24-hour cycle that you would normally pay for. It was having that 8-hour cycle and then not on weekends. And that saved us
don't use
way
it
more
on weekends,
money.
for example, you can use
Yeah.
that option. In development, for sure, that's the right way to go, because you're going to save a lot of money.
Yeah. Oh, and that's a good call out, because never in production would you want to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all from my side. I don't want to hold anybody from the dinner anymore.
Thank you.
No worries, no worries. Well, that's all I have. Those shortcuts to me too were a game changer. So I'm always happy when people mention those, because that makes all for our projects, that's made all the difference.
Astonishing, definitely. I love them, and well, as I mentioned, this is a newborn. There are a lot of ideas. There are a lot of things in the roadmap ahead. One thing that is interesting, if you Google Microsoft Fabric roadmap, they post all the roadmap in security area, pipeline, storage, Power BI, and they tell you when they are planning to release those capabilities, right? And this is public information. And recently they also put the ideas site in where that if you come up with an idea that you would like to see within Fabric and it's not implemented yet, you can post your idea, and then if people, community, data professionals, etc., vote for your idea, well, Microsoft will definitely take a look and see if it is possible to put it in the future, right? So this is quite interesting. I have a personal experience of doing that with SQL Server, right? Posting an idea, got a lot of traction, a lot of votes, and that thing came into Azure SQL a couple of years after. So
awesome.
It works. Definitely it works.
That's fantastic. Well, I don't see any more questions, so thank you again. I know this is coming off a big trip for you, but we really appreciate you coming and speaking for our group.
Thank you, and definitely a pleasure. And anytime, let me know. I'm happy to present and be part of your community as well. Thank you, Cristina.
Fantastic.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye, all.
All right. Bye.